Greetings. My name is Ricardo Barreiro de Monas. I am the chair of the Society of Construction Law Argentina and the partner of Barreiro Law Firm in Buenos Aires. Thank you very much to the Society of Construction Law Vietnam and MRB for inviting me to participate in this webinar on EPCF contracts for infrastructure projects. My mission today is to very briefly provide you with an overview of the use of this contract system in Argentina. First, we need to understand very quickly how the Argentinian legal framework for infrastructure project works. We basically have the very old public works law, which dates back to 1943. It still is being applied with very few non-significant reforms, and this has been the law that has been used since almost uninterruptedly, I would say, since its enactment. The second important law that we have is the PPP law enacted in 2016, basically aimed at attracting private investment in public infrastructure in Argentina, offering perhaps a more flexible structure for partnerships between the state and the private sector, and allowing diverse financial models and mechanisms to reduce risk and improve guarantee methods and dispute resolution methodologies. This law was used for a brief period of time, principally aimed at highway projects, but several factors, including economic instability, political situation, and the lack of confidence of international investors, basically meant that the law could not be continued to apply throughout time. Then we have the concessions law. This is also a quite old law and dates back to 1967, and it was basically aimed or used in toll road projects. We didn't have a quite substantial use other than a few projects in the interior of Argentina, which were not very relevant in terms of as a contracting model, I would say. Another interesting fact is that the concession law, which was referring to a moment ago, was reformed very recently, almost a year ago, by the new government, with the idea of expanding the scope of the law, no longer covering just toll road projects, but expanding to all kinds of infrastructure projects, all kinds of public services, introducing also different pricing mechanisms and modern dispute resolution methodologies such as arbitration and dispute boards. This is something new that is being applied as we speak. In terms of public infrastructure financing, four main sources. The first one and most significant is the state resources, either through government budget or bond issuance. The second most significant has to do with multilateral trade entities, and perhaps from this, the most significant two are the World Bank and the IDB. The third, which is also very significant, has to do with export promotion banks, national banks from different jurisdictions providing financing for the export of goods and services of those countries. And the last is the classical project financing used primarily in Argentina in PPPs, which, given the circumstances that I mentioned, but primarily linked to high inflation and economic instability, was not very successful in its implementation. Concerning the use of feeding contracts in Argentina, I would say that they are predominantly used in those projects financed by multilateral credit agencies, and perhaps the two most notable examples include the Sistema Riachuelo project and the Arroyo Maldonado tunnel project. The first one is the most recent one. It started in 2015. It includes um, an investment of $1.2 billion, again financed by the Inter-American Development Bank. The contractor is a consortium of local and international companies, and they used FIDIC EPC turnkey Silverbook. And the second project, it's basically aimed at mitigating floods in the city of Buenos Aires. The project dates back to 2007 and involves an investment of around $400 million, and the project used the FIDIC Pink Book, the adapted Red Book, as the model contract. In terms of EPCF projects, perhaps the key example here is one of the financial sources that I mentioned a moment ago, and it has to do with national export banks, so export promotion banks. And I brought two examples. One of them I think is particularly relevant for this webinar, and it has to do with the expansion of the Buenos Aires subway system, and involves the construction of a new line, the H line. This project was made through an EPC turnkey contract. The contractor was a consortium formed by Tequint. It's a local construction company, and Regados, a Spanish contractor. And the consortium, the contractor, was asked to bring financing to supplement the resources for this project. They secured a $2016 million loan from the Brazilian BNDES, and which was allocated to the purchase of Brazilian-made rolling stock. The rest of the project was financed by an international loan secured by the city of Buenos Aires through the issuance of debt and the city's own resources. An interesting fact about this project has to do with the special situation this line, the H line, was the first line built in the Buenos Aires system since 1941. You should bear in mind that the Buenos Aires subway system is quite old. It started operations in 1913. It was the first metro system in Latin America, and it continued to expand throughout the years until 1941, in which date the expansion of the system basically was interrupted. Since then, there were a few other projects that basically extended some of the existing lines, but this specific project, the H line, is the first line built since 1941, which marks a milestone, I would say, and probably will lead the way to the construction of three other subway lines that are planned in the city's budget. The second EPCF project has to do with the natural gas pipeline expansion. This is an older project. I had the opportunity to work in this project for several years. It implied an investment of $1.5 billion. Also used an EPC turnkey contract where the contractor brought financing also from the Brazilian BNDES, which was allocated primarily to the purchase of pipes and steel in Brazil, and obviously to be used in the project. So these two projects basically are very good examples to understand and to have a clear view that the EPCF system in Argentina works. It's successful. and traditionally has been implemented through loans of national promotion, national export banks. Um, Another interesting note has to do um, with the use of FIDIC contracts. FIDIC contracts are not widely used in Argentina other than in projects sponsored by the World Bank or the IDB. The private sector doesn't use them. Um, and it's very rare to see FIDIC contracts used in projects that are not uh, public and are not used financed by the multilateral credit agencies. An exception, perhaps, are a couple of hydropower projects that have their own model contract based on FIDIC, but it's not, I mean, heavily adapted FIDIC contracts, but not straight, simple model FIDIC contracts. Now, touching quickly on a couple of issues to consider when addressing projects in Argentina, risks and challenges for EPC contractors. Obviously, the financial risks, basically with the currency volatility, high inflation, payment delays, all this must be considered when planning a project in Argentina. Political and regulatory risks, uh, basically led by policy changes, bureaucracy that may have a strong impact on permitting and paperwork and red tapes. This is not strange. In other South American countries, the situation is more or less the same, and Argentina is no exception. Contractual risks, in addition to legal compliance and the typical provisions to secure payments in due time and due course, I would say that two important issues have to do to force majeure, because in Argentina the concept of hardship and unpredictability of certain situations is not as in other jurisdictions. Argentina has a track record of high inflation, of international debt default, currency instability, which basically suggest that the contractor must be very careful when drafting this force majeure clauses. And the second issue has to do with disputes. Dispute boards are not used in Argentina. They just have been introduced in the legal system through the reforms to the concession law, and we're just starting to use them. You can see them, of course, in those projects where the World Bank or the IDB impose their FIDIC contracts, but other than that, it's a concept that is not present. So you should be careful when drafting and implementing this type of dispute resolution mechanisms. And then, typical operational challenges that had to do with training, personal training, supply chain issues, and so forth. As a conclusion, to close this presentation, perhaps the key takeaway that Argentina presents substantial opportunities for infrastructure development, primarily under the new legal framework of the concessions law. But of course, you must be very careful in what is required to implement the project in Argentina. There's a demand for strategic risk planning, local adaptation of contracts, understanding the local legal framework, aligning this legal framework to the contract that will be used. And the two examples that I showed, the Sistema Riachuelo and the H-line, show that the EPCF modeling has been used successfully, can be implemented successfully, primarily through the support of national export and promotion banks. That would be all on my side. If there are any questions, I will be happy to address them by email. You will find my contact information here. It has been a pleasure to participate. Thank you again, and have a good day.